You're listening to a CNA podcast.
The past 2 weeks in Thai politics have been crazy. It all started when the main opposition Move Forward Party was dissolved by the Constitutional Court. That decision left its popular former leader, Pita Limjaroenrat, barred from politics for 10 years. From the ashes of Move Forward rose the People's Party. That was just the beginning, though. Days later, in a bombshell decision, the same court dismissed Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin. It ruled that he had violated regulations for appointing a man with a criminal conviction to his cabinet. That was enough for Srettha to be removed after less than a year on the job. Then came the search for a replacement. It didn't take long.
Why I didn't plan to take on this role initially. I want to assure everyone that I am fully prepared and determined.
A majority of lawmakers voted for Paetongtarn Shinawatra, Pheu Thai's leader, to be the next prime minister. Yes, Shinawatra. More on her and her father Thaksin later. I'm Teresa Tang. I have the perfect person joining me today to make sense of all this drama. CNA Correspondent in Bangkok, Saksith Saiyasombut. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Teresa. Thanks for having me. I think I'm good. I think I'm okay, but It's been definitely quite a week or two.
Yeah, I want to read a post on X that you made last week after one of the many eventful days on the job, and you called it, I quote, yet another historic, unprecedented, hair-raising, blood-boiling, face-palming, stupendous, flabbergasting, what else you can call it day in Thai politics. What has been the most shocking development for you?
I think there are a few more adjectives that have been added since then. Yeah. I think the most shocking part for me was, for those that do not know me, I've been covering Thai politics for 15 plus years now, going through all the ups and downs, the odd military coup here and there, and the regime change. I think the most shocking part, what we have seen in the past 2 weeks, is how much condensed it was in just a short period of time. When we think back to last year after the general elections and how long that dragged out, if we include the elections and all the drama behind that, that was 5 months. And this has just unraveled in just 2 weeks.
Okay, so it all started with the Constitutional Court deciding to disband the Move Forward Party, a hugely popular party that won the last election. And the court's reason was that that party violated the Constitution because it proposed to change a law against defaming the royal family. What do you think, though? Was that really the reason?
That is a good question. I think that's definitely part of the reason why the Constitutional Court has dissolved the Move Forward Party, which won last year's elections, as you said. I think it's just generally speaking that ever since this party came to the scene in form of the Future Forward back in 2018, actually offering a progressive reformist platform based on ideology, they're posing a challenge to the political establishment. And it's not only the political parties that are rivaling against them, but also the military that has intervened in politics for most of the time, but also other factors. And that also includes the monarchy that still is very influential in today's politics. So that is being seen as a threat. And just the idea of them proposing to amend the controversial royal defamation law that punishes criticism or threats against the monarchs with up to 15 years in prison. Now, that is already a bridge too far. And the argument, if you actually listen to the verdict of the judges, they say that, by proposing that, you are trying to separate the monarchy from its people, that you are trying to shake the fundamentals of this country and of what Thailand is. So this is what they're actually up against. This is actually why they have dissolved the party. So I mentioned the Future Forward Party. It has been dissolved in 2020 for other reasons. So history might not be repeating itself, but it rhymes very much.
Former MFP leader Pita Limjaroenrat, he has a lot of fans, right? And despite it being the end of the road for him, for now at least, he has accepted the decision. He didn't sound too defeated. And I want to play a clip of him just shortly after the dissolution. Listen to this.
Absolutely proud on what I had achieved. Proud of my colleagues, proud of the people who have supported us, and no regrets in the way I've done my job. I have left my dent in the universe, and I'll make sure that I pass the baton to the next generation leaders.
So Saksith, let's talk about that next generation of leaders. The newly formed People's Party is made up of many Move Forward Party MPs. Does the People's Party, though, have the potential to be as successful as Move Forward? A lot of people are wondering.
Very much so, and if not even more so. The momentum hasn't stopped. They have won last year's election unexpectedly, according not only to our estimation, but also to their own estimation. So, and given the buzz that this party still creates, and especially after it has been dissolved and reformed under the People's Party, the momentum still keeps going up and up. I mean, the party is now, by the time we record, it's just 2.5 weeks old and has already gotten millions of baht in donations, and over tens of thousands of people have re-signed for that party. But the question is, though, as the party grows and it gets more and more popular and also a wider fan base, is there going to something to change about its ideology? Are they have to placate to a wider audience in order to be more successful on the ground? Now, we're going to hear from one of the senior figures, a woman called Sirikanya Tansakun. She's not the leader of the party, but she's definitely a senior figure of this movement. And this is what she said.
I think we will continue the core ideology, but the methodology would have been different or not. It's the decision of the member of the new house that we will move in. So we have to decide it again, we have to discuss it again, and we have to work in detail how to solve the problem.
One more word about Peter. He is now banned from politics for 10 years. Let's not forget that. Even though he's immensely popular, he's been a figurehead of the Move Forward party. But listen, the one thing about this party is that their members are relatively young. Peter is 42 years old, and 10 years later, 52 or 53
that's not
years
old.
For a politician, definitely not old at all.
Exactly. Okay, so we should keep an eye out for him. You sent some notes to the editors just ahead of the Constitutional Court vote on Srettha Thavisin, and you said Mr. Srettha appeared pretty confident. Your Pheu Thai sources also pretty confident that he would survive the vote. And then came that decision to oust him, which you described as a major political earthquake. Where were you when the news came down? How surprised were you by this outcome?
So we were following the Prime Minister all day around. And during the day, just to give you an idea how confident he was, he didn't go to court. He didn't go to listen to the verdict. His itinerary was full, not only for that day, but also the following days. So it definitely seemed that he was very confident. So we followed him to a street food market during the day, and then we went to Government House to listen to the verdict. We know that the Prime Minister was inside Government House itself. And then just to give our listeners a little bit of idea, Government House, that's of course the compound where the Prime Minister sits, where his office is, and then there's a little house by the entrance called the Sparrow's Nest. This is where all the journalists sit. So this is the press room, basically. And this is where we were all listening to the verdict. The Thai journalists, they were looking at the TV. I was listening to a live stream because it's easier for me to rewind, and also it was a little bit quicker. Then when the hammer dropped, when the judges were basically saying, no, you did wrong, you have to go, there was an audible collective gasp throughout the room. One colleague even squealed at that as well, out of surprise. We were all taken out of left field. We didn't see that coming at all. So, yeah, we were surprised by the outcome because not only Srettha and the Pheu Thai party were all telling us how confident they were, although I have to say that some people have said that there's a non-zero chance of him getting dismissed. But we thought, given all the political circumstances, that he might get away with a slap of his hands. But what was also surprising for me was how Srettha reacted after that. So after the verdict came, Srettha came in front of the press, which I think is a brave thing to do. He could have just simply vanished and talked about the verdict. Of course, he was disappointed. He disagrees with it, but he thinks that he has done his best in the almost 1 year that he was at the helm. But I also sensed some bit of relief in him as well. It definitely wasn't an easy year for him. We have to keep in mind, he was a property magnate. He was a relative political rookie, and he was thrown into the deep end with his year. He hasn't achieved a lot during his tenure, so there was a lot of criticism and a lot of pressure from him. So maybe deep inside of him, he was relieved that it was all over for him.
Wow, that's very interesting. So the 24 hours after that shock announcement were frantic. We had you actually on our morning bulletin shortly after Thaksin Shinawatra, who is the patriarch of the Pheu Thai party and also, of course, former prime minister. He summoned coalition leaders to his home for an urgent meeting. Can you talk us through what happened?
I want to also add that I was on the opposite end of the day in the evening bulletin as well, because just to give you an idea like how long that day was and how frantic it was. I mean, it started, as you just mentioned, right after the Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin was dismissed. Things were set in motion very quickly because as we just talked about, nobody expected this. So this is why everybody scrambled. So Thaksin Shinawatra, he called the leaders of all the coalition parties to his home to talk about what's next. They agreed very quickly on one candidate, or rather Thaksin told them that he agreed on a candidate very quickly, and that man is called Thaksin Shinawatra. He is one of 3 prime minister candidates of the Pheu Thai party, and he is a 75-year-old former attorney general. But I'll be very honest, when I heard that name for the first time being put forward, I was scratching my head. I thought to myself, okay, that's an interesting choice, because we know that he has health issues. We know that he had to drop out of the campaign last year because of a health scare. So he has to take up the mantle and take on one of the toughest jobs in the country already. Okay, that's how the day ended. Then come Thursday, we heard then from the MPs of the Pheu Thai party in parliament that they had a meeting, but then they said, no, we want Paetongtarn Shinawatra, Thaksin's daughter, and also the Pheu Thai party leader, to be the next prime minister candidate. She's also a prime minister candidate, but this is where the discussion then started. And this is when my phone mailbox and message box just flooded with messages, when you had a lot of different things, a lot of contradictory things coming in. People are saying that Thaksin was against it, some other people were against it, some other were for her, some other were against her. But at the end of the day, they very quickly agreed, and Thaksin relented, saying that, okay, fine, I'll have my daughter take a stab at this.
Yeah, okay, so wait. So on that point, I read somewhere that Thaksin actually did not want his daughter to become prime minister, saying something like, she's not ready for the job. Is that right?
That is one of many rumors that is being thrown around. What we do know is that her mother is definitely very concerned about the youngest daughter taking up a career in politics, given what has happened to the family, given how much a shock tank Thai politics can be. Thaksin himself, according to people that I talked to that are familiar with this matter, he was not as restrictive, not only on that day, but also before that already, because otherwise he wouldn't have let her take the leadership of the party that he founded all the way back in the 2000s.
Let's talk about Ms. Paetongtarn. She is 37. She is the country's youngest prime minister and only the second female prime minister ever, ahead of her aunt Yingluck. What are your thoughts on her?
It was definitely a surprise seeing her becoming prime minister already at this point. And I think it's fair to say that it's also a surprise to her as well. But
she's not very experienced, right? Politically.
No, not at all. I mean, she just joined the party a couple of years ago with no prior political experience. She's the youngest of 3 kids from Thaksin, but people have said that she's one of the most ambitious of all these 3 of them. But as you said, prior to that, she had no political experience. She came from the hospitality world, running or working in her father's hospitality company. And she didn't grow up in the world of the voters that she was chasing last year. She had a very sheltered and very upscale upbringing, spending her education, for example, abroad and that kind of stuff. But one thing that I definitely can say about her is that she has a certain determination, she has a certain ambition, and she also has a certain grit. Because let's not forget, during the campaign last year, she was highly pregnant with her second kid, and she had to drop out at one point to actually give birth to that kid, but then quickly came back on the scene as well when it came around to election day. So this gives you an idea of what a kind of woman she is. And then when she was then confirmed by Parliament as Thailand's 31st Prime Minister, we were only one of a handful of journalists that were able to put a question to her. And I think this is very interesting to hear and for you to listen, because you could see how moved she was by the occasion and by all the emotions that she had in her head. And this is probably the most rawest that we will see, and also probably the most unscripted that we will hear her. What's the most important advice that you have been given on this journey, either maybe in the past hour or before that?
To do my best in every day and in every opportunities that I have. I think that's make me feel like, of course, there's a lot of things going on around me, but if I always do my best and always think about what is happening right now, right here in front of my face, I will be fine.
Shinawatra is, of course, a very familiar name, and the return of this family dynasty has many people asking the obvious question, which is, how much influence will her father, Thaksin, have? What would you say?
His shadow is omnipresent. his figure is omnipresent. I think there's no doubt at all that ever since Thaksin came back from self-exile last year, that he will play a role in Thai politics. He came back last year on the same day when Srettha Thavisin was confirmed as prime minister. The fact that his Pheu Thai party joined hands with his former enemies to build a coalition, and the fact that he spent very minimal time in prison for his past sins, and not in a prison cell at all. He spent that time in hospital confinement. And the fact, let's not forget, that he called all coalition party leaders to his house to talk about what's next. That goes to show that, how much influence and how much power he has. I mean, it is blindingly obvious that he is very much still a player around. But then, of course, there's a question that I said before, that Paetongtarn has ambitions of her own. And she says that she is her own person. But when can she finally be her own person? And when do these ambitions align with Thaksin? Or when do they actually clash with his?
I hope I can ask him for advice anytime that I want, but not all the time, 24/7 like that, because it's not possible. So I am my own person, and I have my own things and my own goals that I have to be achieved in the future. But of course, all the comments from him value to me. And yes, I just wish that I could work with everybody, and including my dad as well.
Yeah, not sure if she could ever really step out of her father's shadow. But talk about having a good week, Just a day after his daughter was elected prime minister, Thaksin himself was included in a royal pardon for prisoners. What does this mean for him, Saksith? Is he out of the woods now? And what would you say are his political ambitions? He seems quite daring. Can I say that?
Oh yeah, braggadocio is probably another word that I would probably put out there. I mean, he's always has a gambler's mindset ever since he entered politics, even before he entered politics when he was a businessman. So concerning his royal pardon, it means that he is a free man for now, because there's also a lèse majesté case against him for an interview that he did to a South Korean newspaper in 2015, that is during his time when he was in self-exile. So the fact that this case is still looming out there has, according to people that I've spoken to, still very much surprised him that it's still hanging over his head. Dare I say, it incensed him as well. So that's why he still has to play along going to court. There was a hearing just the day before we record this. And what was surprising for me that day is that Thaksin took the front door, because during his indictment, he took the back door because he didn't want to be seen going to court. But then, on the second time, he actually wanted to be seen. And also he was wearing a yellow shirt. So yellow is the color of the royalty and of the monarchy in Thailand. So basically trying to say that I am a loyal royalist, and he was showing himself to be very confident. Journalists were asking him so how it was and if he's concerned, and he says, it's nothing. He absolutely seems to be unbothered by it. So, and this goes to show that, there is a certain confidence, some might say overconfidence, in Thaksin himself. And to your question about what are his political ambitions, what's his endgame, I think that Thaksin has been such an influential figure for the past 20 years. I mean, we still talk about him, so that tells you everything. And having covered him in his exile, and also having seen his political legacy, and I think this is a key word, legacy, that he wants to safeguard and maintain his legacy as one of the most influential politicians in Thailand. And I think that he's working very hard to cement that. One thing that we have to also add here as well, his Pheu Thai party lost last year's election, the first time for quite a while. The Pheu Thai party lost Thaksin's home constituency in Chiang Mai as well. So this is a deep, deep embarrassment for the party and for Thaksin himself. And this is why he's back in action. That's why he's fighting tooth and nail for influence and for power, because he wants to put Pheu Thai, aka his party, back to the forefront and back in a position of power. And the thing is that he's fighting on several fronts now. He's not only fighting against his rivals that are his coalition frenemies, as I like to say, but also against the Move Forward Party, aka the People's Party, that a young electorate that never experienced Thaksin because they're all too young and they are just seeing him as one of the establishment. So Thaksin definitely has his work cut out for. And just to give you an idea how Thaksin ticks, I've gone through the archives and I found an interview that he gave CNA in 2012. The question that was asked to him was, when he gets back to Thailand, will he actually seek revenge?
Trying to fear me, afraid of me, and like creating me as a Dracula or vampire. And then finally they fear that their creation. So this is not help. So better do good thing for the people and don't worry about me. I'm going back. I will not be revenge anyone. I just want to forgive. I want to see peaceful country. I want to see unity of Thailand.
So looking ahead, the path ahead, how likely are things going to stabilize under Paetongtarn? Is there any chance she could be ousted the way Srettha Thavisin was, by the courts, or gulp a coup?
Yeah, gulp indeed. The problem about covering Thai politics is that the chances of a coup are not zero. They can be high, they can be low, but unfortunately and tragically, they can never be zero. Having said that, the Shinawats have been toppled by military coup twice. Thaksin himself in 2006, Yingluck Shinawatra in 2014. And by the way, she's still in self-exile, so this is another objective of getting her back as well. But I think that the last military coup, one of the legacies of that military coup is that we have a political constitution that doesn't necessitate a military coup. So you have the courts, right? I mean, that's how Srettha Thavisin got removed. That's how Move Forward got kicked out. And there is a danger that Paetongtarn can also be targeted via legal means as well. So that we are getting a silent coup or a judicial coup, as critics would say.
More broadly, where does this leave Thai democracy? That's a big question, I know. How are Thai people viewing all of this?
There are two types of reactions that I've seen over the past 2 weeks. So one of them is anger and disappointment about how their votes didn't matter. Move Forward had 14 million votes. Pheu Thai Party had 11 million votes at the ballot. And when Move Forward Party was banned, we were at the party headquarters. I can definitely distinctly remember a woman yelling, "Why the blank are we voting for?" And this was so loud that it definitely burned in my mind, that it goes to show that no matter what the Thai electorate is doing, there's always a force that is not elected, that cannot be held accountable by the ballot, that can remove them at their whim. However, there's also the other one, those people that maybe not be tuned to Thai politics, that they are concerned about this political instability, what it means for their bottom line, what it means for their bread and butter issues. So the Pheu Thai Party has promised to fix the economic woes that Thailand has been suffering for years, especially after the pandemic. I mean, we can argue whether those policies are good or not, but they have been promised to make things better, to make the livelihoods of Thais better. And now with the government removed that they have voted for, that have promised to fix their problems, that's of course their concern is higher there. But to end on a slightly more optimistic note, I think that Thai politics is changing in the sense of that people are definitely more aware about what's going on. People don't forget as easily anymore. And it's blindingly obvious to see what's going on right now. I mean, as I said before, the fact that Thaksin is summoning the political party leaders to his house to talk about the fate of the country, that we have a new opposition movement in Thailand that is actually based on ideology and not personality or money. I think that is positive in the sense of that there's a bigger awareness of Thailand of what's going on. And this has been going on for 20 years. And this is something that you could actually credit Thaksin for, because his policies and tailor-made populist policies to people have galvanized and franchised people outside there, because Thailand is a very centralized country, all the way to here that we have a new generation of people that are seeking change and definitely want to see things change from the way they are.
Before we go, as a journalist, Saksith, you have to dig deeper, right? You have to work for those details that aren't just handed to you in a news conference or a press release. How challenging was that over these past 2 weeks? Like, how do you get audiences those updates quickly when a lot is happening behind closed doors as well, in places that aren't really accessible to the press?
Indeed. I mean, this has been not the easiest assignment, especially when a lot of things were happening in secrecy. And the answer to that is old school journalism, in the sense of that you need to talk to people, you need to get out there, you need to talk to sources, and those are sources inside the party that are with those important people that I and other colleagues in their respective fields have built up over the years, and we have built up trust with these people, that we can talk to these people and that we also can trust they're not telling us complete nonsense. But having said that, it's important for me that we don't go by just simply one source, like it's happening in a lot of times. I need more than one source to tell me the same independently from each other for me to be confident enough to actually go out on air and actually tell you these things. But these sources are not worth without a fundamental knowledge about what's going on here, institutional fundamental knowledge about what's going on here in Thailand. I mean, one thing that I like to tell friends is that sometimes I feel covering Thai politics for this long is half a law degree, because especially constitutional matters, because you have to really dig deep and also see what's going on, especially, given that two major decisions have been made by the Constitutional Court, you have to actually look up the Constitutional Court. I always have a PDF file ready on my desktop looking these things up, and also to see how, let's say, creatively they have been interpreted in the past. And this is why these things are important. It's about doing your homework, but also getting out there and talk to people in the know, but also just get out and talk to people.
Watching you at work is such a pleasure. You're smart. Obviously, you're very well informed, but you love your job. It completely shows. Thank you so much, Saksith, for your comprehensive reporting these crazy 2 weeks.
Thanks for having me. As they always say, news doesn't sleep, but I think I need a nap.
Go take your nap. And a reminder that the TV episodes of CNA Correspondent air every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. And you can find all of Saksith's reports on YouTube as well as on cna.asia. Well, the team behind this week's episode is Saya Win, Clara Ong, Crispina Robert, Craig Dale, and me, Teresa Tang. Thanks very much for joining us this week.